Let's start things off with a little reminder. Of course, we want to make sure that we remind, at least I want to make sure I remind myself and offer you the opportunity to see what I don't want to forget. And maybe you might agree. Trump and all states are pirates. Yes, that's right. The pirates all the way. So, yes, Donald Trump offered us this to start the week. Let's not forget.
And there was no response. Turn your ship around. Evacuate your engine room immediately. And you see all these guys running out of there. Now, they're 5 miles away, and one shot into the engine room blew up the engine room. The ship stopped. They used tugboats, and then we landed on top of it. On top of everything else, we then land on top of it, and we took over the ship. We took over the cargo, took over the oil. It's a very profitable business. Who would have thought we were doing that? We're like pirates.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? It's just utterly charming. That's just great. And then, of course, if we can't forget Hegseth, Megadeth, war criminal, because, yeah, of course, some people were very upset that actually this Massachusetts congressman reminded people that Pete Hegseth should be tried as a war criminal. This CNN reporter was not upset.
You believe that
this CNN reporter actually was right, and he was right. But, MAGA talk hosts don't like the truth, evidently.
Do you believe that the Secretary of Defense is guilty of war crimes?
Absolutely. I mean, he's clearly behind the operation to shoot all these boats in the Caribbean when it's very unclear that we actually have any confirmation that these so-called narco-terrorists, a term the administration invented to justify this action, are even on the boats. I mean, in fact, there's a lot of evidence that these are just fishermen, getting jobs, piloting these boats, trying to feed their families. There's been press reporting on some of these individuals who've been killed, who are clearly not war criminals. And on top of that, we then have the strike where they came back and hit it again, a double tap, just purely to kill these survivors who were clinging to wreckage. It's interesting, Aaron, another historical analogy. Back in World War II, the Allies tried Nazi submarine captains for doing this exact same thing. And guess what the conclusion was? They got executed.
Okay, so those are a couple things, and we will continue with more, at least allowing me to remind myself, if you're along for the ride and you don't mind, I appreciate that very much. I don't want to forget some of these things. And I also don't want to forget a great song from a while ago as we think about another character who is involved in pushing for war, and a person who I thought was supposed to be a Christian. But yeah, he seems to be much more in support of lying. Let's hear from not this guy, the liar.
I'll tear your mind out. I'll burn your soul. I'll turn you into me. I'll turn you into me. 'Cause I'm a liar.
All right. Yes, it's not Henry Rollins who's a liar. And of course, please remember, I know earlier in the week I mentioned his song called Low S.O. I don't know if you know the song, but the chorus in it at the end is genius. It's all about, he's looking in a mirror and he's talking about, he says, I think you got a low self-opinion, man. I see you standing all by yourself, unable to express the pain of your distress. You wallow deeper inside. And the chorus goes, if you could see the you that I see, when I see you see me, you'd see yourself so differently. Believe me, if you could see the you that I see when I see you, you'd see yourself so differently. I assure you, I know the self-doubt that burns inside your mind. I know the self-doubt that treats you so unkind. If you could see the you that I see. Oh, man, it's a great song. You got to check out the Rollins Band if you don't know those guys. I would like to apply that to Mike Huckabee, the liar. Yes. So as we head on into the straitjacket of the straits, and we look at the immediacy of what is going on the ground right now, the latest information about Iran taking a ship and Donald Trump's threats of making Iran glow if they don't take our negotiations, they don't take the deal. Let's talk about this giant cadre of so-called Christian liars. So if we head on over into the mighty news notes, we will see, of course, that things are getting a little psychedelic and weird if we think about truth versus what we're actually hearing from avowed Christians. But I don't see how you can be a Christian and a Zionist at the same time. I don't see how one can be a Christian and a statist at the same time, which is part of what we discussed last night on Theology Thursday. And that segment will be out as a separate video this weekend from our great Russian production team. Well, here is the first item, and then we'll get to that breaking story. U.S.-Israeli death partnership. Huckabee outright lies and adds unspoken deception to boot. So, this is amazing. He shows a clip of Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson. What's interesting is he's probably attracting more people to hear what they have to say, and he's not actually doing himself a favor by providing a falsehood in countering what they're saying. So Tucker Carlson said Israel could not sustain a blockade or defend itself for 24 hours without the $1.5 trillion U.S. military backstopping it, and it has gotten an enforcing the longstanding defense guarantee. So here's what he said.
Israel could not sustain a blockade or defend itself for 24 hours without the $1.5 trillion U.S. military backstopping it and enforcing.
Okay, so I think we understand. He's talking about the $1.5 trillion U.S. budget, much of which has been devoted to supporting the genocide, engaging in warfare in Iran, and spreading death and U.S. bases around the world, as we have a standing army here, unfortunately, and we have to live under this when the founders didn't design it that way. Mike Huckabee is accusing these people of trying to deceive folks. He says, neither of these people are dumb. I worked with them at Fox. They know how to Google basic facts. Well, when you put the term Google and basic facts together, Mike, you're already behind the 8 ball. So get away from the pool table. The U.S. provides $3.8 billion, not $1.5 trillion. $3.8 billion, not $1.5 trillion. But at Israel spends many times over that on the United States. We get a huge return on investment. Are they too lazy to research or intentionally lying? So first of all, there's the assumption that he can so-called invest for you, right? I love that stuff. That's just one of the best things of all time. When John Kerry told us, this green technology, we're investing for you. Really, last time I heard about an investment, I thought it was something that was voluntary. I didn't know that it was something that actually you did to me. But in addition to that, we also see that the numbers that he's providing aren't real numbers. Because, of course, this is what Glenn Greenwald notes to us. We already know that the budget for the Defense Department is going to be $1.5 trillion. And Glenn responds, stop lying for Israel. You're supposed to represent Americans, not Israel. The $3.8 billion is the absolute minimum the U.S. gives. Biden gave $18 billion in 1 year alone. The costs Tucker is describing are military deployment costs to protect Israel. And stop worshiping Jonathan Pollard. Now, as you know, I recorded some material from RT the other night that is tied to Jonathan Pollard's run for office to get into the Knesset. But I haven't shown it yet. But in it, he actually is shown saying that, yes, Israel should take all of Lebanon, all of the West Bank, and beyond the Golan Heights, essentially. No surprise. I also want to read this, of course. U.S. has given at least $21.7 billion in military aid to Israel since the war in Gaza began, report says. No kidding. So that's part of the backstop for Glenn Greenwald. And he notes this chart. Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. aid since 1946. Total aid from fiscal years 46 to 2024 in constant $2024. Look at that, Mike. That gets you a lot of picnics right next to the wall where, of course, the trapped people inside Gaza are located. And, you know, that orange color on the screen kind of reminds me of the fact that Israel just changed the line from the yellow line to the red line. So that's just charming. I mean, the orange line, it's like a Boston subway system. And so now they're taking even more land because, you know, evidently they want to have more places for Mike Huckabee to have some picnics, right? Absolutely. So while we're covering that, let's just also mention some of these other nation states, because I've often mentioned the fact that the United States gives money to Egypt, Afghanistan, and South Vietnam, and Iraq, still, South Korea, the United Kingdom, India, Turkey, France, and Pakistan. And that is economic and military aid combined, everybody. So maybe it might be kind of cool if they didn't assume that your money was theirs, that you were somehow their slaves. That would be nice. But Mike, being a good Christian, doesn't seem to care. Thank you, Glenn Greenwald, for doing that. I appreciate that. Now, let's also talk about the breaking story. That's a breakdancing story. As Richard Pape notes, the Iranian Navy seized this oil tanker, Ocean Koi, in the Gulf of Oman. And he says, this is Iran's answer to Trump, effectively. We control the Strait of Hormuz. Take it if you can. Iran's power is growing by the day, he writes. And of course, let's head on over and check it out. We'll show you some of the action video. Right, Russians? Yes. Yes, Iran's power is growing by the day. So here's what we can see right here. You can check it out now, Funk Soul Brother. Wow, that's quite a production, isn't it? That is really something. So obviously, the claims that the United States is in complete control and the claims that we've heard from people like Lindsey Graham and others that, well, yeah, you know, we've utterly destroyed their military. They've got nothing left. Donald Trump saying that out in front of the helicopter. No, of course not. As we noted yesterday, internal documents from the intelligence so-called community reveal that Iran has likely at least 70% of its stockpile still unused. And they can construct even more as time goes along. So I also noted here, despite breaching the ceasefire, which never really was one, since Trump never pulled aggressive U.S. forces away from the Persian Gulf, and he actually increased U.S. naval forces and imposed a blockade, while Iran's actions all have been in response to U.S.-Israeli aggression. Well, by attacking Iranian-tied tanker traffic yesterday, Trump now says that, yeah, he breached it by attacking the tanker traffic. And now Trump says that if Iran doesn't respect the ceasefire, he will see the area glow. Seriously. So here's the headline. This comes to us from RT World News. Trump promises one big glow. Did he get the song by Folk Implosion wrong? Nothing's going to stop the flow. It's flow, not glow. He says if the ceasefire collapses, but it's not just if the ceasefire collapses, which of course is not really a ceasefire. They're pulling the Israeli ticket, right? They got the whole Netanyahu mindset. They claim it's a ceasefire while they never cease fire. Their targets have to cease firing while they continue firing at them. It's like, Is this really ow? I thought you said you were going to stop the fight. I'm stopping the fight. I'm stopping you from fighting. Oh, okay. So yeah, let's go over to this RT World News link and show it to you. And there we go. Here it is. Trump promises one big glow in Iran if ceasefire collapses. The U.S. military has launched a wave of strikes on Iranian targets near the Strait of Hormuz as Tehran accused Washington of violating the ceasefire and retaliating against American warships in the area. And they retaliated against the warships. U.S. President Donald Trump downplayed the latest strikes as just a love tap. After Tehran, he said, trifled with Washington. It's unbelievable. He speaks so frivolously. And obviously we're talking life and death. We're talking world economics and stuff. But in addition to that, he's already claiming your money. And he's speaking like this. It's incredible. So, of course, there's more because Trump still claims the ceasefire is intact, despite saying that the United States is going to control the straits, and if they don't accept our demands, we're going to make them glow. What? Yeah, here it is. He says, if there's no ceasefire, you're not going to have to know. You're just going to have to look at one big glow coming out of Iran, Trump told reporters, referring to the U.S.'s latest drafted peace proposal, which, of course, isn't going to go anywhere if it doesn't include the ability for Iran to have some control over its nuclear energy system and program, and doesn't include peace in Lebanon. That's a big deal. And the Iranians are also going to demand probably a certain period of time to control the straits and have their tolls to get some money back to help pay for the destruction that the United States has caused. The U.S. claims that their ships were not hit, which, of course, is evidently false. Let me give you this. This is breaking about noontime today as Danny Haiphong was going live and checked in on satellite footage that seems to indicate that, yes, the Iranians did hit American ships. And the Americans...
Welcome, everyone. Welcome.
Yes, the Americans are denying it.
Back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haiphong. And as you can see, I am joined by geopolitical analyst, commentator, author, host of his own YouTube channel, Andrei Martyanov. Andrei, good to see you again.
My pleasure.
Of course, yes. Pleasure is mine as well. Everyone hit the like button as you come on. That helps boost the show. And Andrei actually has a background as a naval officer, which is perfect for understanding what has happened in the last 24 hours, Andrei. Before the show, you said it's a pinprick in the midst of the larger war and what's going on. But just to review a little bit about what happened overnight, you had the U.S. military conducting strikes on Iran at the Qeshm port, Bandar Abbas, and then you had Iran announcing that they had fired missiles, drones, and had sent some of their fast attack boats to retaliate against U.S. destroyers there. They claimed that 3 U.S. destroyers, the SS Truxtun, USS Mason, and the USS Rafael Peralta, were damaged and forced to flee. I can show some potential evidence of that from satellite radar. The U.S. has denied this, and Trump said that everything is fine. Nothing has happened to these destroyers. Satellite imagery seems to say that there are a few vessels on fire in the Strait of Hormuz right now, and ongoing as we speak. There are ongoing clashes with Iran saying that any commercial vessels that gets within kilometers of these warships might face some friendly fire. So, Andrei, help us understand what happened, what is happening right now, and why is it that despite Project Freedom being offline, the United States took these measures and Iran retaliated? What exactly is going on here?
Well, it's a lashing out. It's because of this impotent rage of Trump, and that's the only thing. And yeah, he will send destroyers because evidently he's not very good at understanding what is going on, and neither is his administration. But we already know that first, both sides will claim successes or what have you, and in the end, we have to wait and see what really happened. But yes, you correctly stated infrared thermal took the basically shot of the area, and there is something burning there, that's for sure. So we will consider that at least one of the destroyers might have been damaged or something like that. And yes, it's not news. Brandon Weichert of the National Interest fame, and he is I know him personally. He already stated that U.S. Navy already tries to actually, use every single excuse at their disposal to not follow insane orders by Trump administration, because essentially, yes, once you get into the firing range, after that, the salvo model kicks in, and you have to understand that Iran might not necessarily even be trying to hit, but it certainly tries to keep the U.S. Navy assets away from their territorial waters. And
that's the key right there, territorial waters. Kudos to Danny Haifong. And again, I would love to get all these guys on the show, Danny Haifong and Larry Johnson and Ray McGovern and the folks from the Duran and the folks from Anti-War and stuff like that. And like I said, I'm friends with a person over at Anti-War, so I'm hoping to be able to get some of those folks on. And there's just so many great people doing wonderful work out there that hopefully in showing you these segments, it's not too much, but it can attract you to check out their YouTube channels and follow them on Twitter and so on and so forth. So that's Danny Haifong. And if you're just listening in audio, his last name is spelled Haipong. And you can find him as Danny Haifong on that X thing, which is amazing. I know. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is, of course, that we have heard so many great and confident statements coming from so many people. Of course, as Pete Hegseth earlier in the week mentioned that Iran is the clear aggressor. And of course, the United States is in complete control of the Gulf, you see, which is why they want the Europeans to come down and help the United States stop Iran from having control of the Gulf, even though the United States, they claim, is in complete control of the Gulf. And we've heard the same thing from Donald Trump and others, including Lindsey Graham.
President Trump has directed U.S. Central Command to restart the free flow of commerce through the Strait of Hormuz under the umbrella of Project Freedom.
Well, that didn't end too well, didn't it? That didn't last very long either. I don't even really think it started all that much. Do you? No, I didn't. Also, during the week, we got to see Donald Trump freak some kids out about nuclear blasts.
I can tell you we just broke every record, and now we're going to take a hit because we have to make a journey down to Iran to take the nuclear weapon. They would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks. Remember, we sent that beautiful B-2 bomber in, and we blew up their nuclear potential. It was obliterated for those that...
Which, of course, is why they had to go back in and obliterate it again, No, I'm sorry. It was a giant mutant star goat, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That's what I heard. That's the story I heard. There was a giant mutant star goat, and that's why they put all those people aboard the B Ark and sent them away. Yeah, that was the story. That was the narrative. Or was it some other story? I can't remember now. There have been so many stories, right? Oh, maybe they were trying to help the revolutionaries, the ones they were arming. Right? Yeah, I absolutely. And don't forget, of course, that Donald Trump knows better than you do what to do with your priorities.
They're learning to buy, they're changing their habits. So when I did this, I thought the market would go down 25%. And I thought that was a great deal if it did. If it went down 25%, I was satisfied. I said, because we cannot let these people have a nuclear weapon.
Well, curiously enough, he had a deal where they were showing the United States that they weren't going after a nuclear weapon. And I guess maybe we just can't trust Donald Trump, but maybe we can trust Lindsey Graham. Yeah, absolutely.
I love the idea of a Second Amendment solution for the Iranian people. To those...
You mean Iran the nation state that they have their elections and they're a sovereign nation, and they were open to the non-proliferation treaty, open to inspections with the IAEA, and open to inspections under the JCPOA, and they promised not to refine their nuclear material past, basically they were going to keep it at around 4%. And they didn't move it up to 20% until a year after the United States dumped the JCPOA. That JCPOA, which saw the United States finally, after decades, returning some of the money that it stole from the Iranian government, which of course should be the people's money, and finally saw Barack Obama give some of that money back. But then you guys in MAGA used it to criticize Barack Obama. I don't know. It's so weird. It seems like the agreements he had are pretty decent agreements, but you don't like those agreements because there's still a nation state called Iran, and you either want to arm revolutionaries there, which didn't work, and then inflate the number of people who were killed to make it look like the government was killing everybody, or you want to, make it glow. Oh, Trump is not interested in peace. Yes, we've got this. Don't forget, this was Trump's Iran negotiator over on the right. We're going to see him again, Nick Stewart, talking about, of course, that, there's no such thing as really negotiating peace, and that's why Trump put him on the negotiating team.
Yeah. And I want to stay with you because this is Anga Week in New York City, the UN General Assembly, and Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, is running around New York, touting diplomacy, and I'm a reformer, and the media is magnifying that exactly as Iran had hoped. They even brought out Zarif from retirement, right?
So curiously enough, every orientation from the Iranian government to the Iranian religious teams, we'll skip over that one. We'll go back to the judge in Aramante with some great insights from those guys in a little bit. But everything from those folks has been pretty straight up. Everything from America and Iran, Israel has been bogus. It's not Iran that has been engaging in assassinations of people, right? Of course not. It is the United States and Israel that have been engaging in assassinations of people. So let's get back over, of course, into this one. You got it from our great friend, Hugh Hewitt. Now, there's one aspect of this that we played last night that I did not discuss. So I want to talk about this one. Here's Hugh Hewitt. And yes, Hugh Hewitt is on with Noah Rothman of the CIA Tide when it started National Review. And they're discussing how, probably the best thing for Israel to do would be to somehow sabotage the already completely bogus negotiations.
Vance told me on this show when he was a senator or running for vice president, I can't remember, that nations have their own interests and they have to follow their own interests. We don't control Israel. Israel doesn't control us. At this point.
Now, that is where I want to stop, because last night I didn't discuss this, and I did put it out in my X feed. One of the things that you can see there, and I even mentioned, I think I might have mentioned in David Knight's chat. I think I mentioned it today if you're over in David Knight's chat. The way that he anthropomorphizes the nation states, I did not discuss last night, but that ties into the whole philosophy thing. If we were to go back to, looking at people like Thomas Hobbes or even Thomas Aquinas in some cases, or Plato, the idea that the nation state has some sort of magic personality, which really, really was manifested in a most pernicious way with Rousseau and his idea of the general will, where the so-called politicians go into this magic assembly building and everything they come up with, according to Rousseau, is infallible and right. You can't question it. Because it's the will of the people. It's this magic, weird, illuminous concept that somehow with the great evolution of society, people can get together in a room now and they can come up with perfection. I mean, it's completely satanic. It's really, really evil. But that right there, I find fascinating because I'll listen to the beginning. He's talking about J.D. Vance telling him one time that nation states have to pursue their own interests. So if you're like F. Paul Wilson and you ask the next question, perhaps logically you follow the same route that I ask on my questions, and you say, how come I can't decide for myself? Why am I roped into what you have to say? How come nation states can follow their so-called own interests, which is impossible to define, and it's a gamed system, depending upon who's in charge at a particular time, right? What factions are in charge, just like Frederick Bastiat said, the great fiction of government. It's the means by which everyone tries to live off everyone else. But let's listen to this again, because there is this nugget of learning that we can get and carry away.
Vance told me on this show when he was a senator or running for vice president, I can't remember, that nations have their own interests and they have to follow their own interests. We don't control Israel. Israel doesn't control us.
But they can control you and me. Isn't that astounding? So nation states somehow should be left alone, but the people who are the underlings under the nation states, who are forced to pay for what the leaders want, which is basically bloodthirstiness and robbery, you can't. Like, well, if you can't, then how can the nation state come up with its magic concept in the first place? If, again, this is the Ouroboros of statism. If you're too dumb to be able to control your own life and have your own autonomous decisions and follow your own pursuits for your own self-interest, then how is it that you can somehow voluntarily, according to their myth, get together with everybody somehow and magically all of you together who can't make decisions for yourself somehow can make decisions for yourself to join other people who make decisions for themselves to form a state which will force other people to live the way you want them to live. And somehow they'll pretend that that's everybody making the same decision. That's what Hugh Hewitt is pushing right there. That's what J.D. Vance pushes. And I wanted to make sure that I brought that up. I was thinking about that today. I was like, oh, I forgot to talk about that last night. And once more, let's look at Gangster Graham's mindset. Yes, Lindsay. Yes, Lindsay.
This thing is over. To the American people, I know gas prices are high, and I know we're suffering right now. But you pay now, you pay later against thugs like Iran. They tried to get a nuclear weapon, and if you don't believe that, you shouldn't be allowed to drive in your hometown. Donald Trump stopped Iran from having 8 to 10 nuclear weapons by bombing their enrichment facilities. God bless you, President Trump. We were weeks away from a nuclear-armed Iran.
So all of the three major facets that he said there, and the fourth, which is the underlying assumption that he can tell you what you should value, are completely false. The United States is not in charge. It's not over. The United States didn't destroy a nuclear weapons program, which he implies, and they continue to do that, so you know who's being deceptive. And if they had, they wouldn't have had their rationale going in the fall that they have to go in and get the nuclear stuff, which they then changed to, we got to go take care of those wonderful protesters that Scott Bessent said we led to protest in January because we were destroying their economy and undercutting their currency. And then they changed it again to say we got to get the nuclear dust. Now, I don't know if that's what Hunter Biden calls cocaine. I'm not certain about that. But I will tell you one thing. It's having a massive effect on the economy. So let's go now into questions for you. Post your comments and replies on screen at Rumble or over on the X feed, and say hi to all the fellow rockin' Rumblers out there. The Rumblers. Here's a bit on the U.S. economy and the world economy. Sean Puffy Duffy is like the mayor in Jaws. Mayor for mayor, like the Powerpuff Girls, insisting you carry on as if things are normal. Yes. And David showed this today. So I was like, you know what? I was going to show it last night. I got to show this because I was talking about Jaws in my head last night. So here we go.
We live in a very different world. And I just don't think we've had other presidents who have been willing to see the threat and address the threat of Iran. And so I think opens up. You're going to see prices come down immediately. You saw yesterday, energy prices came down below $100 a barrel. I think we're at 93 this morning. Don't quote me on that, but I was looking at things like 92, 93 for Brent crude. So we're in a good place.
We see the price of crude going down significantly recently, but when could we see that at the pump? Especially now we're getting into that summer blend gasoline. 90% of Americans take road trips for their summer vacation.
Well, first of all, we want to encourage all Americans to take a road trip, whether you're going to go 2 hours or 2 days. to see your country. Everyone should come to Philadelphia, by the way. This is where it all started.
There's a lot of background noise there, and I don't have the AI filters that could get that out there. But he's like, everyone should take a road trip, whether it's 2 hours or 2 days, and everyone should come to Philadelphia. By the way, thanks, Sean Puffy Duffy. Well, of course, if you go to my news notes. And by the way, some great comments in there about some things that are happening about the uprooting of trees. We've got that in the news notes, actually. You could be like on staff here. Absolutely. With the Russians, comrade. So let's go back to the news notes and check it out now. Because, of course, perhaps Sean is from Amity, Massachusetts. Everything's fine. Hey, you better not tell. I don't want you telling them there's a giant shark that's made its home in the waters right off the coast.
Amity is a summer town. We need summer dollars. This is not the time or the place to perform some kind of a half-assed autopsy on a fish. If people can't swim here, they'll be glad to swim at the beaches of Cape Cod, the Hamptons, Long Island. Sick vandalism. Our summer girl goes swimming. Swims out a little far. She tires. Fishing boat comes along. It's happened before. Now, I want those little paint-happy bastards caught and hung up by their Buster Browns. I'm pleased and happy to repeat the news that we have in fact caught and killed a large predator that supposedly injured some bathers. Now, I am not going to stand here and see that thing cut open and see that little Kittner boy spill out all over the dock. Love to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name into the National Geographic. Amity, as you know, means friendship. You yell barracuda. Everybody says, huh? What? You yell shark. We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
That's classic. And I actually recorded another segment that I want to show you. 5 minutes from now, just about, we're going to be visited by Eric Peters of Eric Peters Autos. He'll be joining us to talk about fuel prices, EVs, and, of course, central planning. And here's the key central planner of Amity, Massachusetts. And by the way, there's a wonderful video of Richard Dreyfuss talking about meeting the granddaughter of who's the guy who played Quint. And it's a wonderful little story. But check this out. This is great. Here we go.
Brody, sick vandalism. That is a deliberate mutilation of a public service message. Now, I want those little paint-happy bastards caught and hung up by their Buster Browns.
That's it. Goodbye. I'm not going to waste my time arguing with a man who's lining up to be a hot lunch. I'm going to see you later.
And yes, sharks and politicians, one and the same. Oh, yes, indeed. What a great movie that was. Jaws. So much fun. Oh, my gosh. I saw that movie after being terribly sunburned, and it was very, very cold in the movie theater, and it freaked me out. Amazingly, I was in good company today because, and I put the link in there if you want to find the link over YouTube. It's easy enough to find. Just scroll down if you put in Mayor Amity, you'll find it. But I said, it looks like commodity trader Jeff Curry agrees with the Amity connection, and his observations on the secondary sanctions and Chinese-Iran economic ties are key. So this is very, very important. As Trump gets ready to go to China, the Chinese are not going to be playing softball with that guy. But here's the opening with Mario Nawfal as they opened up, and the camera was already rolling as they started to chat.
Why the market just doesn't seem to care about any of this.
That's my question to you. I'm actually like, why? Like for me, everyone I speak to, every analyst, we're already live, yeah. Every analyst I speak to just tells me how unprecedented this is in many ways and how it's impacted on multiple levels and multiple supply chains. And yeah, I look at the markets and look at oil and other commodities, and it just doesn't seem priced in. I'm not the expert, but I'd love to get your thoughts. That's a good first question.
Well, I think there's several factors why the market is discounting this. One is when they look at any of these disruptions like Abqaiq in September of 2019, it was a non-event when the Iranians struck one of the Saudi fields. So a lot of people in these markets that have been trading them for quite some time, or more recently, over the last decade or so, have never seen anything of this magnitude. You got to go back into like Libya in 2011 and go back into the 80s and 70s to see something of this magnitude to really appreciate the potential impact it could have on the markets. But I think a couple of other factors more near term that are driving it is right now we are in a deficit, not a shortage. That means that demand exceeds supply, we're drawing our inventories, but we haven't run out of anything. It's like basically we are borrowing oil from the future to keep demand going. In fact, I liken it to that scene in Jaws where the mayor comes out and he goes, "Beaches are open." Yet you see the fins swimming around the shoreline and you go, something bad is still in the water. And I think it's that the fact of the matter is you have really robust demand, everything feels good, you're drawing your inventories, but what happens when you run out? And I think that is in some parts of the world it's happening. Europe, it's probably sometime in the next month to month and a half. US, it's probably sometime in July. By the way, the stock draws in the US 2 weeks ago were some of the highest I've ever seen. And we look at, everybody goes, it was only 11 million barrels.
Stock draws, that's from the storage, that is the emergency storage.
Exactly. By the way, the U.S. was a net exporter of oil. Let's remember, everybody talks energy dominance, but the United States is still short crude oil. It's a net exporter with the products, but with the crude oil, it is short. And for the first time since the 1940s, it exported so much oil over the several weeks ago that it's now a net exporter, and it's drawing down those strategic reserves, exporting them to the rest of the world, such that their refineries are going to have a problem. Look out in a month and a half, it's going to start to begin to bite. So that's one. And the other point is you'll listen to most of the macro people. They're going to tell you, no problem. Oil is a very small share of global GDP. It has shrank. Now, I want to be careful about the state. I'm going to agree, relative to prices, the price of oil spiking just doesn't matter. But just like the magnets that went into the doors of Detroit cars as a price mat, they don't matter. But when China threatened to take them away, you would shut down Detroit because you don't have those critical minerals. Oil is the same thing. From a price perspective and a share of GDP, it doesn't matter. But you pull it out of the system, it matters. And the reason I bring this up is I like to emphasize the volumes matter. We in commodities, well, how do we quote things? We go millions of barrels per day or millions of metric tons, millions of bushels per day. We don't quote in notional. Macro people quote in dollars. Financial people quote in dollars. And that is a very important distinction. And I remember we go back, it was very similar during COVID. I remember we were going, you guys, you have a problem. You got a problem. It's coming your direction. Every commodity guy said, you got a big problem. Every macro guy, every finance guy said, oh, no. Boom, inflation's up 10% year over year. And it's because they do not respect the idea of volumetric change. And I just want to give you an example like this. Let's say I give you $100 million and you give it to some rich guy. He goes to Tiffany's and buys one necklace, lots of diamonds on it and everything. Does it contribute to GDP? Absolutely, yes. The notional value be $100 million. Does it create any stress on the system? No, not really. Now let's take that same $100 million and give it to a bunch of low income guys. What are they going to do? They're going to go out and they're going to buy corn. And because then the volumetric impact it has on the economy is much larger. So notional $100 million is the same, but the volumetric impact is radically different. And, one of the key points that we made back in COVID is who has that money and who spends it determines what kind of impact it would have in terms of volume. And so when we think about this, people are going, we look at notionally, it doesn't really matter. I agree with that statement. It doesn't matter. It's small. But volumetrically, you pull it out, ouch. And I think that's what the world's going to learn sometime in the next, call it 3 to 8, maybe 12 weeks when we start to run out of these commodities.
Interesting. So the way they measure it, when they look at it notionally, they don't understand how significant it is. When you start looking at it from a metrics perspective, volumetrically, then you start that's a better forward-looking indicator. Kind of gives you an idea of the impact it would have. That's a good example, by the way, of the diamond necklace and the $100 million versus corn, and necklace versus corn. So, if this continues, if we see a blockade for another, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks.
Wait. I love how you say 2 to 4 weeks. Everybody has been saying 2 to 4 weeks since this started.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, I just want to emphasize the Red Sea is still shut down 2 years later. It's only gotten back.
That's
it's still
crazy.
down 75%. The Houthis are not as wealthy as the Iranians, and they have kept it shut for 2 years. So you have one evidence.
That's
Why do you
crazy.
believe this one's going to open?
That's
Where do you
crazy.
get your 2 to 4 weeks? You just randomly pull it out of thin air, just like everybody else, like these investment banks that are out going, don't worry, it'll be over with in 2 to 4 weeks.
Well, what happens if? So what happens if the Red Sea one is interesting because the Houthis are not attacking ships. They haven't attacked a ship for months now. I think since September last year, from what I understand. How is it that many ships still don't go through the Red Sea?
But would you risk it knowing they're still there? Would you, if you're providing insurance, would you let them do it? And by the way, let's be very clear. Why haven't the Houthis attacked? Have you ever looked at the flags of those ships leaving Yanbu? All Chinese.
All right. So we're going to pause it right there. Now, there's a lot more in this conversation, and it's fairly technical. I had to look up a number of things. Some of the stuff I already knew. But one of the things that I do want to stress here is, you know how Trump was going to impose his secondary tariffs? Both Jeff Curry and Larry Johnson today mentioned that the Chinese are responding to the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying that if there are nation states that are dealing in Iranian oil, if there are companies with from any companies dealing with Iranian oil, then they will impose secondary sanctions against those countries where the oil might come in and then it might get resold. Now, this has a major impact in a spider web all around the world, right? And what's very interesting is Mr. Curry, who is a commodities trader, notes that the Chinese government, and Larry Johnson noted the same thing today on the judge's Intel roundtable today. He said the Chinese government has threatened the banks that support and have bought the bonds of those companies, that if those companies don't fulfill their contracts, the Chinese will no longer deal with those banks. That is massive. Very big deal. So that is these are the stakes that are at play right now as Trump gets ready to go to China. And I don't think Trump is at all equipped to handle any of that stuff. Because the only way you can really handle it is to step off your ego and favor free trade. He hates free trade. He's always hated free trade. He's always tried to find an angle around free trade. That is fascinating. Now, Duffy also says we're not going to have oil supply shortages in the U.S. because we produce so much. But as Chris Martenson, who understands economics, also notes, that simply is not true. The U.S. is usually a net importer of crude oil because we don't produce the same type of oil that we use. The only reason we're exporting so much, of course, is because they don't have the refining capacity. That's one of the things I wanted to make sure I noted right after that segment. Again, I've written about the refining capacity. The U.S. doesn't use the oil that it pumps out there. It can't refine it. It sends it elsewhere. So as we note here, Secretary Duffy, writes Chris Martenson, says we're not going to have oil supply shortages. The U.S. is usually a net importer of crude oil because we don't produce the same type of oil that we use. The only reason we're exporting so much at the moment is because we're draining our strategic petroleum reserve. Not good news. So here we go. This is amazing.
This person in California, however, the Grand Californian wrote, filled up the Silverado. I'm quite sick to my stomach now. $7.39 a gallon. They're already paying out there. Can you imagine that? $240 to put 32 gallons in you? What? This is shocking. People in the UK not too impressed. They're saying, quit your whining, because in the UK right now, 206.9 pence per liter, that works out to about $11 a gallon already. Now, what's crazy to me is that we have people like Secretary Duffy here said, we're, the United States, not going to have supply shortages because we produce so much here, he said. I'm not going to play it. We don't have to hear him say that, but that's what he did say. We're not going to have supply shortages because we produce so much here. Not exactly accurate, Senator Duffy, and here's why. First, the United States is exporting a record 6.4 million barrels per day of just crude. This is just crude. We export a lot of other stuff, as I've detailed before, that's not crude oil. It's more things like ethane, which is 2 carbons, or propane, which is 3 carbons, butane, 4 carbons. Yes, the stuff you get in your lighter. This is crude oil, and we have in the United States about 3 to 4 million barrels a day of some type of crude that we produce out of the shale patch that our refiners don't actually want. Can't use it. It's very light. So we export that. And we have been importing about 6 million barrels a day of the crude we do want. On balance, we have been a net importer all the way up till this chart. And now we are a net exporter. Where did these extra 2 million barrels come from? Those are coming out of inventories, my friends. And because we're draining our inventories to help keep the world supplied for just a little bit longer, we're going to be at some point experiencing much, much higher energy prices. This is actually draining the strategic principal core value of the country and exporting it to the world. And this is not a smart thing to be doing.
So that is why we saw earlier the reference to taking it from the future that we saw from Jeff Curry. So that's a really big deal. And of course, Duffy and the EPA know that the government has different rules for you than it has for itself. And they can skirt the rules that they place on you. Remember, of course, statism is there to protect you. And yeah, not to really extract your wealth and crush your individual agency at all, right? Well, there's a story from Anti-War that touches on the Trump administration, the fuel problems, and a connection to the military that you might not know unless you read Anti-War.
So this article is from Nick Cleveland Stout at Responsible Statecraft. So the Pentagon knew that Joint Base Andrews, an Air Force base just 10 miles southeast of Washington, D.C., was leaking jet fuel as early as December when the base's fuel system failed a leak safety test. But Pentagon officials did not tell Maryland that the base was leaking jet fuel until late March, when someone on the base saw oil in a nearby freshwater creek. Even after the initial call, the Pentagon withheld information about a second leak until 2 weeks later. Altogether, Joint Base Andrews has lost at least 32,000 gallons in jet fuel, with an unknown amount spilling into the Piscataway Creek, a tributary of the Potomac River. So a whole bunch of jet fuel was likely dumped into the Potomac, and it's this is kind of following a pattern of these types of things happening in the Pentagon, keeping it quiet and not telling the people who live there and the local government that it's happening. So this is kind of becoming a big scandal, and lawmakers and local officials are pushing for accountability and trying to get more answers about what exactly happened here.
Oh, man. And, you know, there's so many other heavy stories that Anti-War reports, but that ties in very well with the just reckless abandon that the military industrial complex has. They don't care. And anytime people criticize them, it's typically, how dare you criticize the U.S. military? Don't you know what they're sacrificing for you? Like, really? Do I have a choice, or am I being sacrificed for them? I think we can get which direction the road travels. Unbelievable. And another story, this out of Louisiana, about another refinery going up in flames. Mariel Nafal's got this one. This is down in Louisiana. And I can't even remember which number this is now. Yet another one, massive smoke pouring from Chalmette Refinery in Louisiana after a big explosion. How many refineries is this now in 2026 alone? This is getting ridiculous, he says. So there you go. I don't know what to make of it myself. Who knows? But I'm sure the authorities will investigate. Now, I want to check in over at Rumble. Some great comments from people at Rumble and see what you all have to say. Great thoughts there from so many people that have already seen already. Yeah, and we have Explosion in Fire Rock, Chalmette Refinery from Birdhouse Blues. Absolutely. And we've got everything is always 2 more weeks. And Birdhouse says, not to mention there was a refinery explosion or fire in Louisiana earlier today, 5 miles east of New Orleans. Yes, you guys are on top of this. And a lot more EV bikes are on the road. Yeah, so hopefully they'll be chaining them up away from your apartment building if you're living in an apartment building. Yes, indeed. Let me see. Oh, yeah, Birdhouse says it would be double awesome for Guard to get Andre Martyanov on. That would be awesome. I'd love to talk to Andre. I think he's fascinating. He's just a fun dude. Yeah, Birdhouse says, I love Andre.